Hi everyone, how you all doing? Um, I'm just enjoying the day here with my cup of coffee and taking care of a bit of a cold I have. And speaking of cold, it's snowing out here where I'm at in beautiful British Columbia and uh, and also in Northwest Washington State. Um, so forgive me for the occasional cough and the sip of my coffee, but I did want to share a little bit today um, on some program design tips, if you will. I know there's a number of you out there who are in the role or the profession of designing programs and curriculum and philosophies and approaches. Whether you're a superintendent of a school or a principal or an educator, whether you're a therapist or a counselor or even a parent out there, when you're thinking about your role of discipline and disciplinarian and how you administer that, um, designing a plan or a program um, is important, isn't it? In a number of different aspects of life. Um, and I wanted to share a couple of tips, and of course, a couple of tips that I hope are a bit challenging, maybe a bit new. Yeah, for some of you who have been following my video clips, you know my professional kind of interests are in the area of transpersonal psychology, Jungian psychology, mythology, and also, I've got tried quite a bit of training and education and other forms of approaches, other forms of counseling. Spent a lot of time in studying different approaches to trauma and addiction and all sorts of different things. Along with that, for the last 20 years, I've been really diving into and studying what I feel is the recent, well, I say recent, again, over the last 20 years, we're seeing it more significantly, and that is a magnified presence of entitlement and indulgence in our society. Um, and so I responded to that by coming up with a philosophy and an approach. And it's called the empowerment philosophy, and the approach is an integrity model. And I've designed curriculum around that and things as well. And I've been applying that for the last 20 years with some really good results. And one of the jewels in the crown, I guess you could say, of the agencies that I've worked with is when I supervised what was called the baristas program back in the early 2000s. Um, it became an internationally awarded and recognized program, and it was unique in a couple of ways. It was traditional in one way. Excuse me. It was traditional in that it was a employability skills program for at-risk youth, trying to help youth build the skill and capacity they needed to successfully engage the labor market. The first unique component of that was that it was a partnership between a nonprofit and a federal government. That's pretty normal to see. But in steps Starbucks Coffee Canada at that particular time, which made this program incredibly unique. No nonprofit working with at-risk youth had ever been able to profit or partner with a for-profit, high image company like this ever before. Well, why? Because Starbucks puts so much effort into its quality of service and brand that to bring in at-risk youth would be kind of a little bit dangerous for them. But nonetheless, we were able to work this out and convince them that it was within their community service agenda, etc. And we got the go-ahead for it back in 2003. That's when I was brought to the program to, I guess you could say, solve the issue around how do you get a group of traumatized youth who come from foster care, who have addiction issues, who have mental health issues, who have been physically, sexually abused and neglected. How do you get a group of youth who generally don't really like people that much to, and that's putting it lightly, as you all know, to deliver outstanding customer service? seemed impossible to do. In fact, I remember a Starbucks district manager saying to me one time, she goes, John, we can teach anybody to make a frappuccino, but what we can't teach is character. And I said, you know what? That's what we do. And that was what the whole program was about. Yeah, it was an employability skills program. It was traditional in every sense of it. There was life skills, a few weeks of life skills up front, and a practicum on the end. I mean, that's pretty standard stuff, right? Nothing magical about that. I'll tell you about where the magic occurred was in the philosophy in the curriculum, because the curriculum was not aimed at employability. The curriculum, if you will, the philosophy, was aimed at addressing the inflated sense of entitlement and indulgence that often came or could rise up or be inflamed by traumatic incidences within their history. Now, I should say at this point that trauma does not cause a sense of entitlement and indulgence. It can inflame it, and often does. The presence of an immature entitlement and indulgent mentality is really basically woven into who we are as human beings. It's part and parcel of the psyche. It's embedded deeply. And that's developmentally what we would say is infantile. So the stage, if you will, or what we might call infantile, is marked by narcissism, egocentricity, and grandiosity, and those are already in our psyche. And I've done other videos and presentations that explain that more. But just to say that when there's trauma present, it often inflames and magnifies it. And so that, of course, that phenomena of inflated entitlement and indulgence was very present in the population that we were working with. Now, that being said, I want to point out step one here, and that is to hold a grand vision. Now, working with traumatized populations, and you work with an agency that looks out into the community and it sees a lot of distress, right, and a real need for service. Because people are in anguish, people are suffering. And the first normal yet counterproductive response to that is often the desire to want to do something about it. What do I mean by that? That seems a little crazy, doesn't it? Don't we want to do something about it? I understand that is kind of the traditional psychological response, but what I'm suggesting is there's a deeper need, there's a different response that can yield better results. And not to do something about it, but to be something for it. The grand vision, we must carry a grand vision into the work that we do. It isn't a vision for employability. That was not the program vision. That was not the vision that I brought into the program. The idea is that if we could go speak more deeply into the psyche of the individual, speak more deeply into the truth of who the person was, if you will, in accordance with the belief that the person we're working with wants to be a person of integrity. Now, in my work all across the board, and all the different counseling hats I've had, in the last decade, I'm a family counselor. So whether I'm working with parents or youth, and I ask them the question, or I make the statement, the declaration, I know you want to be a person of integrity. Is that not true? Everybody says yes. I have not had one person say no, I don't want to be a person of integrity. People understand that deeply. People have a deep desire to know who they are deeply and to live a life that reflects who they are deeply. That is a deep desire in all human beings. And because it's a deep desire, we can call it archetypal. It's a deep, powerful psychological orchestration, configuration, reality, whatever you want to call it, in the human psyche. So I speak to that. The grand vision that I held for those participants was that they all wanted to be a person of integrity, including myself. So what did it mean for me, first and foremost, as a program uh, leader, founder, if you will, to be a person of integrity? It meant that I had to share with people what my vision was. And my vision did not include, or it was not focused around employability. Would people become more employable? Absolutely. I mean, that is a done deal when people become people of integrity. When integrity is restored within a person, that's a big statement, or a big label given, but what does that break down into? That breaks down into people want to be generous again, that people want to be loving again, that people want to contribute to society again, that people want the best for themselves, that people want to respect themselves, that they respect other people. Well, guess what? Those are exactly the traits that would make these youth successful in Starbucks. You see, I did not want to respond to the traditional kind of knee-jerk reaction of doing something, providing them with all these kind of skills and cognitive kinds of tricks, about how to manage time and communication and all that kind of stuff, which was traditional life skill stuff. None of that would really make sense, or none of it would really be assimilated into the psyche unless the trauma was addressed. Why? Because trauma is preoccupying, and it inflames entitlement and indulgence, a self-focus, a self-infatuation. You can't be of service to other people if you're self-infatuated. So we had to begin to disintegrate those narratives in order for what was true to come forward. That was the grand vision. Now, while my managers were out there telling everybody we're doing an employability skills program, we were in the classroom doing an integrity program. Not only that, we were telling people that they were their own worst enemy. And this is something that we proposed to people right in the interviews. Every person got interviewed before they could get in the program. And in order for me to be a person of integrity, we had to be transparent and perfectly clear about what we were going to do in that classroom. We were going to support everybody in being a person of integrity, while at the same time acknowledging that everybody can be their own worst enemy. And so our task was not so much going to be to approach employability skills as it was to begin to help them uncover how they could be their own worst enemy. Which led to, if you will, some of the cognitive distortions or the untrue or tragic narratives that arose out of traumatic experiences. When those narratives began to disintegrate, it's much like the old, analogy or what have you of, chipping away at a stone to expose the beautiful statue that's already there. The philosophy is one of deconstruction. It's not construction. It's less is more. It's a movement away from doing into being. We're chipping away at what people are holding on to, and when they release it, what gets revealed is beautiful. It's a true reflection of who they really are. But in order, again, to set the stage for that kind of programming, it's up to you to follow your calling. It's up to you to be in touch with your grand vision and be willing to verbalize that and to be willing to share that with others and to be willing to put that on paper and market the program in a way that's a reflection of that, knowing that when you do that, you're speaking deeply into the grand vision that others hold. It's something more precious to them than anything else, and that they will want to gravitate towards your program. And in this particular program, we only had 10 seats in the program, and we ran 3 cycles a year. Initially 2 cycles a year, and then 3 cycles a year. So we had 10 seats to fill. Guess what? We had 50 plus participants or youth signing up for the program, wanting a seat in that program every cycle. So remember what I talked about, about sometimes programs have challenges getting the seats filled. They have challenges, selecting good participants for the program because they're letting people into the program that they know they shouldn't, but they have to get the seats filled. That they're not hanging on to participants through the program, that they're not retaining participants, that they're not hitting their outcomes and their targets at the end of the program. In designing a program along archetypal lines, you're associating yourself, you're connecting yourself with a deep psychological power The program becomes very attractive that way. It not only became attractive to the youth in the community, it became attractive to people like yourself, the educators, the counselors out there who were making the referrals. The program, there was a very small staff that ran the program. We were more focused on what was going on in the classrooms and in the curriculum and working with the youth. So the marketing of the program eventually caught fire, not by us, but by the adults. If we often call them the gatekeepers. The school teachers, the alternate school teachers, the counselors out there that were working with youth, the youth workers, the church leaders, these people who were in contact with youth became champions of the program because the way we spoke about the program also spoke deeply into their hearts. And again, what that created was a huge waiting list for the program. And pretty soon word got out about how successful the program was. And we were getting requests for replication from the United States and other parts of Canada and all over the world. You might be asking yourself, well, what were the outcomes like? Okay, 10 participants in the program. It was the very first cycle that we ran. If you work in nonprofit programming, you know that oftentimes it's kind of in the 11th hour that your contract comes through and you bring staff together and create a program, and you don't really get to do the kind of marketing that you like to do to get the program off the ground. That was the first program that we ran. We took some pretty difficult youth into the program. The contracted outcomes were that upon program completion, 70% of the participants would have graduated, 80% would have found employment or had gone back to school within 90 days after program completion. Well, guess what? We graduated 10 out of 10. And guess what? 7 out of 10 got offered permanent employment with Starbucks. And the 3 who didn't get offered employment or refused employment with Starbucks were employed within 40 days after the end of the program. 90% of the youth returned to school. They had all not been attending school. Almost all of them went back to school after that. We kept even more intricate, if you will, statistics for some time. We saw several go off anti-anxiety and depression medication. We saw significant reduction or the stopping of use of substances, substance abuse. Family relationships improved significantly. Health, again, emotional stability improved significantly. I tracked this particular group for a number of years, and within a couple of years, I think 5 out of the 7 were promoted to store management positions. So that was back in 2003, and I can tell you right now in 2018, there are still several working with Starbucks today. I see them from time to time on social media, and they're just doing great things. So the second archetype that I want to share with you real briefly is the archetype of desire and sacrifice. This is a huge problem these days in lots of programming. In other words, what happens, again, people and agencies get caught up in the frenzy of wanting to do stuff to ease the distress of the community or the people in it. And so they end up offering all sorts of bells and whistles and incentives for people to get into the program. And they make it, in other words, they make it easy for people to get in the program. But here's the catch with that. Now I'm talking to these people who have done this, and they're having problems getting people in the seats, and they're having problems keeping people in the seats, and they're having problems with retention, and they're having problems with their outcomes. I've said this for years. The best outcomes we ever got in our youth programming was when we had fewer bells and whistles. But what happened is that the agency began to move away from an empowerment philosophy and an integrity approach back into a traditional life skills format. And so when that happened, of course, outcomes started to decrease, and the agency's response to a decrease in outcomes is to add more incentives. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. It never did work, and it doesn't work. Desire and sacrifice. What does that mean? That means the human psyche knows the value of something it desires by what it has to sacrifice in order to get it. Simple, isn't it? But profound. We all know that if we give people things and don't require any responsibility, don't require a contribution on their part, they're very likely going to not appreciate what they got. They're going to assign very little value. I often see this with parents who were parenting from guilt or fear or other issues where they allow their kids all sorts of indulgences. Whether it be buying a $300 pair of shoes or buying them a $800 phone, or whether it's allowing them to drink or have sex in the home. They're allowing all sorts of indulgences. And what happens on the other end of it? Well, next week, they're going to say, "Where's little Susie's phone? Where's your phone?" "Oh, somebody stole it," or I lost it, or I sold it, or "Where's that coat we bought you?" or what have you. "Oh, I left it at so and so's house, and now I don't know where it is." And so you see that when people are given something and no sacrifice is required, the value they place on it is very minimal. So knowing that archetype exists in the psyche, if you're going to design a program and you want to increase outcomes, you want to increase retention, you want to increase a participant's ownership of the program and the pride that they're going to experience of participating in the program, you're going to want to facilitate a sacrifice. You're going to ask them to give something up. That's why in the interviews, as I mentioned before, they were notified that this was an integrity program, but that you're going to be your own worst enemy. And that as a matter of my integrity, I'm going to facilitate an experience for you to give up whatever it is you're doing that's sabotaging your success, that's getting in the way of you being a person of integrity. It's going to cost you something more. It's going to cost you something that you don't even understand you're doing, but it's going to cost you. Are you still interested? We would say, absolutely. Like I said, we had a waiting list of 50 people wanting to get into the program. It was one of the most difficult challenges I think a human being can take on. Is to look at yourself and to see how you're your own worst enemy. And why would you want to do that? Well, because it's a matter of your own integrity, because you truly desire that. So, I know it seems counterintuitive or what have you. Like I said, most people panic when they're designing programs and they're trying to get people in it. They're trying to lower the bar. They're trying to make it easy. There's a way to if you will, to open the door to a program, but to continue to invite people into the best of who they are. That they're going to have to make some sacrifices. So, again, just to wrap this up, as a matter of integrity, being in touch with your own calling, your own grand vision, inviting people into that, allow yourself to be inspired by it, let it show up in the language that you speak and how that shows up in your marketing material and how you're talking to people about it, because it's going to ignite their vision and they're going to bond with you in that, and they're going to become champions for you and your program, right? And then desire and sacrifice. Set up that threshold, orchestrate that, knowing that is a sign of respect and love, because we all want our kids, if you will, and the youth in our community to become people of integrity. But we know that growing up demands sacrifice. So facilitate that, orchestrate that. Know that you're in good company. Know that you've been authorized to do so. I'll be producing a few more videos to give more tips. But again, if you're interested in knowing more about a program that, for a program that you're currently working with or one that you want to design, I'd be happy to share with you more information. because this just creates such good results, and it's such a reflection of who we really are and where we need to be right now as a nation, experiencing the challenges that we are experiencing. So you're not alone, and let's jump into this together. Take care.